Clarion. Hey, Hampton. Welcome back to another week of distance learning. Last week, we took a break from our sideways stories to read a nonfiction text about schools 100 years ago. Today, we're jumping right back in to sideways stories with chapter 4, where we learn a little about Sherry. For your thinking job today, we're thinking about character motivation. Character motivation is why a character thinks, feels, or acts a certain way. How do you figure out character motivation? How do you figure out the reason why a character does something? You define the specific moment in the text that tells you what the character wants. After you find the part that tells you what the character wants, you need to ask yourself, what does the character want? How is the character feeling? This will help you figure out why the character is doing or saying something. Today, I want you to focus on Mrs. Jules and why Mrs. Jules thinks, acts, or feels a certain way. Chapter 4, Sherry. Sherry had long eyelashes. She weighed only 49 pounds. She always wore a big red and blue overcoat with a hood. The overcoat weighed 35 pounds. The red part weighed 15 pounds. The blue part weighed 15 pounds, and the hood weighed 5 pounds. Her eyelashes weighed 1.5 pounds. She sat next to the window in Mrs. Jules' class. She spent a lot of time just staring out the window. Mrs. Jules didn't mind. Mrs. Jules said that a lot of people learn best when they stare out a window. Sherry often fell asleep in class. Mrs. Jules didn't mind that either. She said that a lot of people do their best learning when they are asleep. Sherry spent all of her time either looking out the window or sleeping. Mrs. Jules thought she was the best student in the class. One afternoon, it was very hot. All the windows were open, yet Sherry still wore her red-blue overcoat. The heat made her very tired. Mrs. Jules was teaching arithmetic. Sherry pulled the hood over her face, buried herself in the coat, and went to sleep. "Mrs. Jules," said Kathy, "Sherry is asleep." "That's good," said Mrs. Jules. "She must be learning something." Mrs. Jules continued with the lesson. Sherry began to snore. "Mrs. Jules, Sherry is snoring," said Kathy. "Yes, I can hear her," said Mrs. Jules. "She must be learning an awful lot today. I wish the rest of you could be like her." Sherry began to toss and turn. She flopped over on top of her desk and then rolled over on top of Kathy's desk. Then she rolled back the other way. Kathy screamed. Sherry rolled out the window. She was still sound asleep. As you know, Mrs. Jules' class was on the 30th story of Wayside School, so Sherry had a long way to go. After she had fallen 10 stories, Sherry woke up. She looked around. She was confused. She wasn't in Miss Jules' class, and she wasn't at home in bed. She couldn't figure out where she was. She yawned, pulled the hood back over her eyes, and went back to sleep. By that time, she had fallen another 10 stories. Wayside School had an exceptionally large playground. Louis, the yard teacher, was way over on the other side of it when he happened to see Sherry fall out the window. He ducked into the volleyball net, hurdled past the kickball field, hopped over the hopscotch court, climbed through the monkey bars, and sped across the grass, and caught Sherry just before she hit the ground. The people in Miss Jules' class cheered. Sherry woke up in Louis's arms. "Darn it, Louis," she said. "What'd you go and wake me up for?" "I'm sorry, Sherry," said Louis. I'm sorry, Sherry repeated. "Is that all you can say? I was having a wonderful dream until you woke me up. You're always bothering me, Louis. I can't stand it." Sherry laughed and hugged him around her neck. Louis carried her back up 30 flights of stairs to Mrs. Jules' room. That evening, when Sherry went to bed, she was unable to fall asleep. She just wasn't tired. All right, that's the end of chapter 4. Here's your exit task. Get a piece of paper and a pencil and answer the following questions in a complete sentence. Number 1, why did Mrs. Jules say it was okay for Sherry to stare out the window and or sleep in class? Number 2, what was Miss Jules' wish for the rest of the class? Number 3, what do you think Mrs. Jules' motivation was to allow Sherry to sleep in class? So why do you think Mrs. Jewell said it's okay for Sherry to sleep in class. Don't forget to take a picture of your answers and text them to me by Friday. Can't wait to see your work, and I hope you enjoyed Chapter 4.